That's Nick.
And that's Joseph. And today we're here to talk about Waiting for the Barbarians, the fifth film directed by Colombian auteur Ciro Guerra, and also his English language debut at that, which premiered at the 2019 Venice Film Festival in competition, and will be available on digital on demand August 7th, 2020, courtesy of Samuel Goldwyn Films.
This film is set in like the 1800s.
Yeah, like a colonial era.
Somewhere like Eurasia.
Somewhere in Eurasia, I would guess. So it's based on a 1980 novel by J.M. Coetzee, who has adapted his own work for the screenplay, and it's unspecified in the novel as it is here, but based on how the people look that are the nomadic barbarians that are constantly being referred to, to me they look like they could be in Kazakhstan, on the border of Kazakhstan, but somewhere in Eurasia, I guess. Also, the empire that everybody's working for is also unspecified, but I would say, inferring from the casting choices, the British Empire.
Okay, so we find this outpost, kind of in the desert, that is run by the Empire. There's a magistrate there who's played by
Mark Rylance,
who I really liked. He just going about his business when a colonel from the Empire shows up. Who's played by Johnny Depp.
Colonel Joll.
So the colonel shows up and basically says like he's concerned about the situation with the barbarians, and really he's just referring to the nomadic people in the region.
And the magistrate, like, what situation?
And the magistrate, so there's a scene where the magistrate explains what's happening, and he says a really great line about hysteria.
Hysteria is the consequence of too much ease.
Yeah. Basically, he's saying that every generation there's sort of this like hubbub about these people and the fear surrounding it, and then we have to go through this rigmarole of like demonstrating that these people are not barbarians. We have a symbiotic relationship. Yes, every now and then someone steals a sheep, but it's fine. So the magistrate seems pretty chill about it, until some of the nomads are captured and tortured. And it's clear that the colonel, Johnny Depp's character, is like, his mission is to come out here and torture these people to get information and exterminate all of them. So it escalates very quickly. During that time, a woman who's played by...
You mean the woman he takes care of?
Yes.
Oh, Gana Bayarsaikhan?
Who I also really liked.
Who is also an Ex Machina.
Yeah. So she's one of the nomadic people who are captured and tortured. Like, they break her legs and
they
tear up her back.
They burn her eyeballs so she can only see peripherally now.
Yeah, like, they do her so crazy. So the magistrate takes a liking to her, and from my observation, like, falls in love with her.
Yeah, he shares intimacy with her.
So during this period, it's clear what the Empire's intentions are, having the colonel there. The magistrate's frustrated. He decides to, once the woman he has helped and fallen in love with is in a proper condition, he wants to take her back to where she is from, just to show them like, hey, I'm okay, and hopefully he'll come back with her. But when they go, she's like, no, I'm good. I'm going to stay with my people. So it's obvious he's heartbroken, but there you have it. So when he returns back to the outpost, now we have Robert Pattinson there.
Officer Mandel, who's
an officer. Yeah, he's like an underling to the colonel. And he's like, magistrate, your actions are treasonous. Like, we found all this shit in your apartment. Like, what the hell are you doing? These barbarians are savages, and you're up in here laid up with them and protecting them. So then things get worse because more nomads, barbarians, are brought in. They're tortured. The magistrate sort of has a confrontation with the colonel that does not go well. And basically he ends up being like somewhat tortured and then kind of like a broken man. So now he's at the outpost. He's no longer the magistrate. He's kind of like a joke. When he has a final confrontation with the officer that Robert Pattinson plays, where he kind of says like, basically, how do you sleep at night? How do you eat knowing that you treat people this way with all this blood on your hands?
And he calls it after you worked with people.
Yeah. He's so good.
He's excellent, yeah.
Like, just like the dialogue, his acting, his voice,
his presence,
his delivery, it was so good. Because he seems like such a reasonable, like, compassionate man. But anyway, he has this final confrontation with the officer, And that Robert Pattinson's character is like, you know what? The gate's open. Why don't you leave? Because he knows he'll just die out there. So as the magistrate's like, okay, fine, I'll go. Someone enters the outpost, which is an officer on a horse who has been murdered. Like he's tied up to the horse, so he just kind of is riding in dead, and the officer's like has been scalped. So this means war. We have to assume that it's the nomads, the barbarians, who have done this. So, you know, of course you would think, well, I guess this means war. Like these officers are gonna suit up and suit out and boot up and suit out, whatever you say. But no, these fucking cowards basically like pillage the outpost, steal everyone's shit, take some women, and leave. The end. Okay. I thought this was a very well done, somber film.
I thought so too. You know, I was surprised because most of what competes in Venice, well, part of this year, also plays in Toronto, and this was one of those films that wasn't scheduled in Toronto, and it kind of had a mixed reception, which is surprising because I thought it was a very elegantly told, sure, obvious with some of its messages, but I think they're important ones. So.
I think it's I think the production quality is high.
It was shot by two-time Oscar-winning cinematographer Chris Menges, who went for The Mission and The Killing Fields.
I did watch the trailer. I think I didn't pay full attention because I saw Johnny Depp, and to be honest, I thought this film was going to have the tone of, what's that film with Johnny Depp and Gwyneth Paltrow?
Oh, I haven't seen that film. Mortdecai.
Mortdecai. I thought this film was going to be like Johnny Depp playing like sort of a bitchy, campy, like flamboyant, you know, person in charge, and
like his French Canadian, the Kevin Smith films.
So when I realized that no, like he's kind of an awful person, and he's not, you know, a big part of the film.
No, and you know what? I don't. He usually
wasn't distracting.
He usually rubs me the wrong way. It's distracting. I thought this was a good use of him. But you know, I'm familiar with J.M. Coetzee's work, and lots of his films are about dealing with colonialist issues in post-colonialist parameters. And I've read Foe, which is a kind of a retelling of Daniel Defoe's Robinson Crusoe. To me, I haven't read the novel Waiting for the Barbarians, but I would imagine that, to me, it sparks a dialogue with Conrad's Heart of Darkness. And throwing Johnny Depp in there, I can see him intensely being interested in playing Colonel Joll, because it's very reminiscent of Kurtz from Heart of Darkness, Apocalypse Now, and Johnny Depp's obsession with Marlon Brando. So you could see him trying to get his little sadist on in there. Although he's got those sunglasses on that look really kind of punk, which reminded me of that Duck Doctor in Nightmare Before Christmas.
I haven't seen them.
You haven't? Oh, no. It's fun. But you look. Who my sister says looks like Anna Paquin, but
oh god. So something that really struck me that so the magistrate, that character. So for the first half of the film, initially I'm like, oh, the treatment of the nomadic people is not very. It seemed watered down, but then you brought up a good point that it's because we're seeing it from the magistrate's perspective.
Yes.
So I thought that was very elegantly done, because the magistrate is kind of like. He's like one of those people who's, you know, he has good intentions and he wants to think better of people, but the reality is everyone's trash. So he's like living in the clouds and doesn't see like what's happening, and then it escalates so quickly. And then once we hit that threshold and then we see what's really going on, then the film takes an even like a darker turn. Obviously.
The horror, yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was really well done. Like the as a function of the storytelling.
Because, you know, you show too much torture, it takes on the pallor of exploitation, and the bits that you do see are horrific enough, and I think just hearing about the testimony of what happens to the girl he cares for, I think is horrific. And then when Joll returns with that group of people strung together through their mouths with the wire, like it's hard to watch.
Yeah, there are a lot of things I feel like I could talk about at length. I think his relationship with the woman,
which is kind of touching.
It's touching, but it's interesting because he basically wants to own her.
Yeah, this is a movie. This is a narrative about realizing our own positions in a power structure that's problematic and how we benefit from it and how we're oblivious to that and how we need to take ownership of that to change that and dismantle the system. And I think that's brilliantly played there. And you had said that you think they would have killed him, the magistrate, after they string him up by the arms in the tree. But he doesn't. We show some time has passed and he has a beard. And that's where we get, I think, a very integral scene with Greta Scacchi, who I didn't even recognize, where she's kind of like the maid or the cook in this outpost, and she's shaving him. And they're talking about the girl, and that's where she tells him, like, oh, yeah,
she couldn't
stand you. And I think just that's the importance of him having to be alive, is to have that epiphany of, like, he thought she meant so much to him and blah, 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 but you were causing her pain that you weren't even realizing as you were giving her succor, you know. But
I also think, like, the magistrate had good intentions, but I think a pivotal scene is when the nomads are brought back and they're all stringed together through their mouths. And one of the officers, well, first of all, the townspeople are like, yeah, you know, kill those barbarians. And it's like, whoa, like, is that the type of people we are? It really reminded me of, like, when, ICE started deporting people and having all those kids, like, in the border. Just kind of like how so many of us were outraged, and then so many people are like, oh, we don't give a fuck. And it's like, wow, this is my neighbor, this is my coworker. Like I thought we were all kind of in agreement that, like, we're all human and we all deserve, you know, fair treatment. But then the minute they bring in these people who they're telling you are barbarians, even though you have no experience with these people in a negative way, you're ready to see them all, like, tortured. And then one of the officers hands one of the young girls in the outpost, like, a stick, and she starts beating one of the nomadic people. I just thought how sad that must have been for the magistrate to witness, because he was sort of in charge of this group of people, and I'm sure he thought we were better than this, but really we're not.
As we would think now. But, you know, like, there's a lot of timelessness about this, because even as you describe, like, talking about the line about hysteria is the consequence of much ease. You know, under Obama, everybody got kind of complacent, and now
I felt real comfortable.
Now, you know, then all of a sudden, like, immigration became such a huge hot button issue again. We were fooled, like, the people were fooled into thinking that we needed a wall. It fits with what's going on right now. The flimsiness, I think you said as we were watching it, of balance, of how suddenly.
Yes, because doesn't he tell one of them, like, oh, we'll get back to normal? He tells one of the nomadic people, like, oh, we'll get this sorted out, we'll go back to normal. But normal still isn't good enough.
Well, normal
because
still,
even it's like how we're talking about, like, race relations in this country right now. It's like, okay, so even if everything settles down and, like, there's a vaccine and we can all go back, shit still wasn't great.
Right.
Like, we have a lot of work to do. So it just feels so hopeless to see these people in this movie, like, these nomads, like, y'all were already, like, on a thin line, you know, like, on thin ice with these motherfuckers, and it's like,
because
it's not going to get better.
He brings up in there because they view us as, like, the foreigners that are going to go away someday.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, it also made me think of right now, the privilege of having the ability to say, I want to go back to normal, is that you benefited from what normal was when so many people didn't. Yeah. Or maybe you didn't that much, but it just, you became,
it feels better than it does now.
You became used to what you could get out of that system. But
what would you give this film?
3.5 out of 5.
I would give it 3 out of 5.
I think that it's an English language debut from a Colombian film director. You haven't seen his previous films, but I think Embrace of the Serpent is fantastic. His last film, which he co-directed with Cristina Gallegos, Birds of Passage, definitely worth checking out. I think he's one of the most exciting directors working today. So I'm saddened that it's just going to be plopped in a bunch of stuff streaming without, I think, kind of proper conversation about it. Based on a major author's work that Philip Glass was inspired to make his own musical out of. And I think it's important to note that the title is taken from a Greek poem as well. And I think we didn't even talk about the irony of the title, Waiting for the Barbarians, is they are the barbarians.
Yeah, the nomads are not the barbarians.
Right, but just a thought-provoking film, very elegant, for whatever faults you can find with it. You know, Pattinson and Depp or whatever, but Mark Rylance is excellent in this. And if you haven't paid attention to him, or Intimacy, the Patrice Chéreau film from the early 2000s, and, you know, his Oscar-winning performance in Bridge of Spies, he's good in that too.
Okay. Anything else?
No.
All right, bye.
Bye.